Welcome to session 16 of the Simple course. Today we present the dynamic maturational model of attachment and adaptation, which is a relatively little known attachment model developed by one of Mary Ainsworth's students, Tricia Crittenden. The DMM, as the model is known, provides a logical link between attachment theory and other topics we'll be discussing in the course, including the trauma spectrum disorders, structural dissociation theory, and internal family systems. To watch the introductory video entitled Inherited Trauma, please go to the website itsimple2021.com, session 16. Next are our usual reminders directed mostly at people doing the course in a group. Please take a few moments to read these on your own. To watch this week's mindfulness practice video entitled Mindful Breathing, please go to the website now. For people doing the YouTube course as part of a group, you can now pause for questions, comments, or feedback. Let's now do a quick review. In session 14 of Simple, we discussed a brief history of attachment. We talked about Bowlby, Ainsworth, and Main. We talked about attachment in infancy, avoidant, anxious, secure, disorganized, also called the ABCD model. We talked about attachment in adults and how attachment styles develop in cycles of well-being and distress. Today, we will cover Simple's manual session 16, Attachment Part 2, on the dynamic maturational model of attachment and adaptation, which is also known as the developmental maturational model, or the DMM, as we will henceforth refer to it. We'll also briefly discuss repetition compulsion. As usual, at the midway point, we'll break. And as usual, we'll have time for discussion. Please rate how well you think you did your homework for this past week. What is the dynamic maturational model of attachment and adaptation, or should I say the DMM? The DMM is a model at the leading edge of attachment theory. It's a model that, in contrast to Ainsworth and Main's simpler one, is relatively complex, but also very useful if we want to understand the whole spectrum of psychological issues associated with attachment disorders. The ABCD attachment model, which we previously discussed, is a classification of attachment in infancy. Traditional attachment theory has assumed that those four infant attachment styles remain present more or less unchanged through adult life. The DMM says otherwise. According to the DMM, at different stages of psychosocial development, other attachment adaptations evolve. As we describe them today, you will see that they do capture aspects of psychological issues that the ABC model does not. Although the DMM's adaptations still fall under the categories of secure, anxious, avoidant, and disorganized attachment, they go beyond these categories. The DMM describes the types of psychological issues that are seen over the course of psychosocial development. Just like the ABCD model, DMM is not just a theory, it is based on empirical research. Today, we will start by briefly reviewing the traditional Ainsworth-Main ABCD model that we previously discussed. Then, we will present the theory behind the DMM, which is a bit challenging and has to do with how information is exchanged between different centers of the nervous system and how they become distorted. We will then present the various DMM adaptations, which I think will make a lot more sense to you. Humans over their lifespan develop in many different ways, including physically, spiritually, interpersonally, morally, and intellectually. The DMM is a developmental theory which considers the development of psychopathology or psychological problems over the lifetime. Before we start exploring the DMM, let's define a few key terms that we will be using today. These are commonly used terms, but as we will see, their psychological definitions are slightly different from how we use them in everyday language. Emotions are states that involve three distinct components. A subjective experience or feeling. B, a physiological or biological response. And C, a behavioral or expressive response. The basic emotions include fear, disgust, anger, surprise, happiness, sadness, embarrassment, excitement, contempt, shame, pride, satisfaction, and amusement. These basic emotions can be blended together in the same way that primary colors can to create more complex emotional experiences. Feelings are the subjective or conscious experience associated with an emotion. Affect is the behavioral or expressive response associated with an emotion. Note that feelings and affect may be completely different. Mood is an emotional state that, in contrast to an emotion, is less specific and less likely to be provoked or instantiated by a particular stimulus or event. Mood can have a positive, as in good mood, or a negative, as in bad mood, valence or value. If moods are the ocean tides, emotions are the waves. Let's now quickly review some features of the traditional Ainsworth-Main ABCD attachment model. B, or secure strategies. To attach and survive, the person can from infancy express to caregivers their true thoughts and feelings. When faced with danger, Bs realistically assess it and appropriately run away in flight or fight it, and in both cases, tend to successfully deal with the danger. A, or avoidance strategies. To attach, they have to dial down emotions. In other words, they suppress or repress emotions and develop ways of thinking about others, themselves, and relationships that are distorted but keep them safe. They appear rational, but it's not true rationality, in that their emotions and thoughts are not just about the present, but are heavily influenced by their past. A's prefer to deal with perceived danger by running away, ignoring, or trying to control it. C, or anxious strategies. To attach, they dial down thinking and dial up emotions in order to stay safe. In other words, they act on impulse, and thinking, if present at all, follows later. They are emotionally expressive, but as we've seen, their emotions are dysregulated. C's prefer to take on or fight danger. D, or disorganized strategies. To attach, they use combinations of A and C strategies. They don't assess danger realistically and both run towards and away from it, but in seemingly random patterns. Although the Ainsworth and Main ABCD model of attachment styles is very useful in understanding human psychology, it also has some significant limitations. These limitations were one of the main reasons that led Patricia Crittenden to develop the DMM. Some of the limitations of the traditional model are: one, the ABCD model of attachment, which we previously discussed, may be simplistic. Children develop not just one attachment style, but different ones to different attachment figures. The strange situation only studied attachment to mothers. Two, disorganized attachment is found in about 10 to 15% of classified children and a very significant proportion of all adults presenting for mental health care, especially those with diagnosis of complex PTSD and borderline personality disorder. The ABCD model does not consider disorganized attachment to be an adaptation, but rather a falling apart or breakdown of adaptation. Three, the ABCD model doesn't take human cognitive and psychosocial development into consideration in its account of psychological problems. It only studied attachment styles present in infants and in adults. It does not consider attachment adaptations that might arise in school years and adolescence. Four, the ABCD model doesn't explain some types of psychological issues, such as delusional disorders and psychopathy. Patricia Crittenden's dynamic maturational model of attachment and adaptation, or DMM, tries to address some of these shortcomings. The DMM is a complex map that builds on the traditional attachment model, bringing more fine detail to this evolving theory. Don't worry if you don't understand all of what we're going to talk about today. Like Mary Main, Patricia Crittenden was a student of Mary Ainsworth. Recall that Main coined the term disorganized attachment as a fourth attachment type to describe the 10 to 15% of children who, in the strange situation, could not be categorized into one of the other of Ainsworth's three types of attachment. Disorganized attachment is a type of attachment present in most people diagnosed with borderline personality disorder. In disorganized attachment, the parental figure, who would, under ideal circumstances, be expected to ensure the infant's safety, is also perceived as being dangerous and causes the infant fear. When the infant is confronted with an external threat, it is conflicted about approaching this dangerous attachment figure to seek safety from the external threat. Main saw this hesitant and confused behavior as a falling apart or breaking down of attachment adaptations and deemed it not adaptive. In DMM, the ABCD model becomes a pie with slices, each with a slightly different attachment adaptation style. All DMM attachment adaptations are considered adaptive. According to DMM, how A, C, and D strategies manifest changes as the person develops from infancy to preschool, school age, adolescence, and adulthood. Let's now consider the theory upon which the DMM is based. The DMM considers that humans have evolved three parallel survival strategies that are involved in the development of attachment adaptations. They are 1, cognitive, 2, emotional, and 3, somatic survival strategies. Each of these survival strategies is associated with an information center located in a particular nervous system region: the rational brain, the emotional brain, and the body. 1, the first survival strategy is based on cognition or rational thinking and is associated with the cerebral cortex. This strategy processes information from the world in a cause-effect, logical, and chronological fashion. It distinguishes past from present and one individual from another. 2, the second is an emotional survival strategy associated with the limbic system and brainstem. It is instinctual and habitual and does not distinguish past from present or one individual from another. It mediates the relationship between internal, somatic, or body arousal states and their external expression or affect so as to maximize the chances of survival. 3, the third is a somatic body or gut strategy associated with the physiology and arousal states of the autonomic nervous system. It controls where on the arousal curve we are: calm or alert, hyper or hypoaroused. We have become familiar with the concept of emotional, rational, and wise minds. Today, we're introducing a fourth kind of mind, the somatic or body mind. René Descartes introduced a separation of body and mind that is inherent in our modern Western thinking. It may, however, make more sense to think of body and mind as two aspects of the same thing. Body is mind seen from the outside, and mind is body seen from the inside. This idea would also make the health of the body and that of the mind inseparable. The DMM proposes that the psychological issues arising from insecure attachment are fundamentally disruptions in information flow between the somatic, emotional, and cognitive nervous system information centers. Somatic information refers to gut feelings and body states of arousal. Emotional information. Emotions integrate internal and external information or gut feelings with information provided by the senses. Cognitive information. Thoughts add a narrative or story to emotional and somatic information. In a securely attached, emotionally healthy person, there is a free exchange of information between the somatic, emotional, and cognitive levels. This is called true information. True information is exchanged when somatic information is accurately integrated into emotional information, which is accurately interpreted into cognitive information. This is a process of self-empathy, attunement, or mentalization, or knowing what is happening inside of you. This true information free flow happens in securely attached children who have attuned and responsive parents. The parents are attuned and responsive to the child's somatic, emotional, and cognitive information, which teaches the child by example to become self-attuned as well. Disruptions in information flow occur when they are necessary for survival, in that these disruptions serve to preserve attachment with that individual's parental figures who are not optimally attuned or responsive. In insecure attachment, in order to maintain some form of attachment, which is necessary for survival, the information exchanged between the somatic, emotional, and cognitive levels is unconsciously distorted. In order to preserve attachment and survive, the child unconsciously transforms information by minimizing, denying, falsifying, omitting, or creating a delusional reality. This happens in children whose parents are not optimally attuned and responsive. The children don't learn to accurately integrate somatic information into emotions or correctly interpret emotions into narratives. This distorting of information leads to a failure of self-empathy. Information not only flows between the three levels within the individual, but also flows between individuals. If the information is distorted within the individual, it is also going to be distorted when that individual interacts with other people. Psychological growth in people with attachment disorders involves improving the quality and veracity of information flow within the individual and between individuals. This promotes empathy for the self and for others. To review, the DMM postulates that mental health issues arise when the information flow between the nervous system's three information centers is disrupted. The free flow of information between the nervous system's three information centers may be disrupted in the course of psychosocial development to promote attachment and to defend against danger. The free flow of information can be restored when wise mind becomes aware of and repairs these information disruptions. As we will see, the DMM theory brings together several concepts, including nervous system physiology, attachment theory, personality development, and dissociation. The DMM uses a number of terms to describe the types of information flow between the somatic, emotional, and cognitive centers, including true cognition, true affect, false positive affect, false negative affect, and distorted, omitted, falsified, denied, or delusional cognition or thoughts and beliefs. Let's consider how the DMM defines these terms. From infancy and through the course of early development, the somatic, affective, and cognitive nervous system centers adapt in order to promote attachment or connection to caretakers, which is necessary for safety and survival. True cognition is when the person's thoughts about their attachment relationship are an accurate representation of what those relationships are really like. True affect is when the person's affects or their expression of emotions about their attachment relationships are an accurate representation of what their emotions about those relationships really are. True cognition and true affect are hallmarks of secure attachment. The person can say what they think and show how they feel, and they will be safe and attachment preserved. In insecure relationships, there's no trust, and if people say what they think or show how they feel, the relationship is threatened. With unattuned, unresponsive caretakers, in order to secure and preserve attachment and hence survival and procreation, developing humans unconsciously learn to distort, omit, falsify, deny, or have delusional thoughts and express false affects. Ways in which affect can be altered during development. Alterations in the intensity of emotions and affect. Emotions and affect can be dialed up and displayed prominently or hidden, suppressed, or repressed. Emotions and affect are dialed up when that's required to get the attention of a less than optimally attuned, preoccupied parental figure. The intensity of emotions and affect can be dialed down when the attention of a parental figure is unattainable or punitive. There can be combinations of dialing up and dialing down in the same person. Alterations in the affect that is displayed. False positive affect is when negative internal states are displayed as positive affect. False negative affect is when neutral or positive internal states are displayed as negative affect. Ways in which cognition can be altered during development. Distorted, omitted, falsified, denied, or delusional thoughts and beliefs are habitual ways of thinking about self, others, and relationships that develop as adaptations to certain parental environments, serving to keep the child safe, but which then lock that child as they age into certain patterns of relating to non parental figures that often result in distressed relationships. These altered thoughts become the person's worldviews or how they see themselves, others, and the world. That is a lot of information. Can we bring it together in a way that's more relevant to our understanding of psychological issues? The PI model is the heart of the developmental maturational model and is very clinically relevant. After that theoretical overview of the disruptions and alterations in cognitive and affective information flow between the three nervous system centers, let's go through the PI model in some detail. I think it will help us understand how information gets distorted and what those distortions look like when they manifest in personality. Does the DMM accept the secure, anxious, avoidant, and disorganized classification in infants? Yes, in infants, the DMM and the traditional model are essentially the same. So, attachment adaptations that develop in infancy. At the top of the pie are B's 1 to 5, which are variants of secure attachment. On the left side of the pie are the avoidant A's, while on the right side are the anxious C's. In the middle of the pie are the A-C or disorganized types of attachment. These avoidant, anxious, and disorganized responses are the classical adaptations seen in the strange situation. In infancy, the Ainsworth-Main attachment model and the DMM are essentially the same. From infancy, A, B, and C infants process information differently. Let's look at how secure, avoidant, anxious, and disorganized infants process information differently. With an attuned, responsive, and predictable parent, the secure child can express what they are really feeling, and that is seen and accepted by the parental figure as what it really is, a developmentally appropriate expression of the infant's inner world. With a partially unattuned parent, the infant may have to dial up their affect or behavioral expression of emotions in order to connect and stay safe. This distortion results in anxious attachment. With a very unattuned but predictable parent, dialing up affect doesn't help promote attachment, so the infant minimizes affect and relies on cognitive strategies so as to try to figure out the parent's patterns and adapt. This distortion results in avoidant attachment. With an unpredictable, threatening, or unattuned parent, neither cognitive nor affective strategies are very effective in promoting safe attachment. So the infant goes back and forth between the two and is not organized around a particular one. Without a strategy to attach and obtain some soothing, the infant more easily becomes overwhelmed and has extreme states of arousal and resorts to dissociation. As children mature into adults, they can only manifest attachment adaptations associated with the stages of development they have already reached. After infancy come the preschool years. What does the DMM tell us about attachment adaptations in the preschool years? It's in the preschool years that the developmental maturation model diverges from the traditional ABCD model, as it describes two new attachment adaptations. Preschool-aged children may develop new avoidant and anxious cognitive and affective strategies. One, A3 and 4, compulsive caregiving slash compliance, and two, C3 and 4, aggressive and feigned helplessness. Let's consider how the compulsive caregiving and compliance and aggressive slash feigned incompetence attachment adaptations arise in the preschool years. Avoidant, A3 and 4. The compulsive caregiving and compliance attachment adaptation is a rational strategy that uses false positive affect while looking after an incompetent parent and hiding or suppressing feelings of hurt and abandonment. This strategy says, I need to take care of her so that if anything goes wrong, she's here to protect me. If she's depressed, I'm going to comfort her, bring her to things, and be cheerful. I will get more of her attention this way. I will be obedient and anticipate her needs so I don't get punished. I will anticipate her needs. These children have given up attending to their own needs and focus on the parents' needs. They smile even when they hurt. They make others feel good. Beyond infancy, the avoidance in avoidant attachment manifests in ways that aren't necessarily behavioral avoidance. What is avoided is emotions, including their own, and perceived danger. Anxious, C3 and 4, aggressive and feigned competence attachment adaptation is an affective/emotional strategy that uses minimized cognition and distorted negative affect. Feelings of hurt and abandonment from distracted parenting are modified and either dialed up in aggressive demanding of attention, and then when negative attention is given by the caregiver, dialed down in displays of helplessness and feigned incompetence. These are the kids who are openly aggressive, hit, kick, shout, say unpleasant things to hide fear, but also feign helplessness, often somatically in the form of illnesses, to hide anger. So there's infancy, preschool, and next come the school years. What new attachment adaptations are seen in the school years? In the school years, the DMM introduces one new anxious attachment adaptation, the punitive/seductive adaptation. School-age children develop a new C strategy, C56, punitive seductive. Let's consider how the punitive seductive attachment adaptation arises. Anxious C56, the punitive seductive attachment adaptation is an emotional/affective strategy in which the cognitive information transmitted is false. The child lies as a way of maintaining connections. Affective strategies rely on trying to seduce others by flattery, praise, attention, etc., and punishing those who cannot be seduced. These are the kids who are bullies, belong to gangs, and steal. The punitive kids use false cognition or deception. They lead you to think you know what they're going to do, and then they stab you in the back. They make you think they really like you. The punitive child is obsessed with revenge. The seductive child is obsessed with being rescued by potential, but sometimes predatory attachment figures. These strategies are learned at home in dysfunctional families as they work better than any other strategy to maintain attachment. Next comes adolescence. Tell us about the attachment adaptations that develop in adolescence. In adolescence, kids go through puberty as they become physiologically, if not psychologically, sexually mature. The developmental maturational model introduces one new avoidant attachment adaptation, compulsive self-reliant/promiscuous. Puberty sees the development of a new avoidance strategy, A56, compulsive self-reliant and promiscuous. Let's see how the compulsively promiscuous and or self-reliant adaptation strategy arises. Keep in mind that highly stressed children often become adolescents or reach puberty faster than those that are less stressed. Avoidant A56, compulsive promiscuous and or self-reliant attachment adaptations. The common denominator in these two strategies is the absence of or shutting down of the capacity for emotional connection to others because that connection was never present in the relationship with the caregivers. These kids don't know what love feels like. Emotional connection and love is substituted by compulsive self-reliance, in which the person doesn't need anyone. This contrasts with healthy self-reliance, seen in people who are able to make intimate connections. Self-reliance may coexist with or be independent of compulsive promiscuity, which is the repeated attempt to connect with another physically without having the ability for emotional connection that is present in people with secure attachment. Consciously, individuals crave connection while emotionally they can't stand it. Hence, emotion is dialed down. With these kids, no other strategy worked to keep them safe. The self reliant say to themselves, only me, no one is trustworthy. It's only what I can do for myself. The promiscuous say, I think there could be a person out there for me, but it's not anyone I know. It could be a stranger. They make superficial relationships that they carry to physical intimacy very quickly, then find the person doesn't live up to their expectations, and they go back to compulsive self reliance. These kids are often depressed. They also run physical and psychological risks as they deny or repress negative affect. I don't feel pain. I'm not frightened. And finally, in physical development, we come to adulthood. Tell us about the attachment adaptations that develop in adults. In adulthood, the developmental maturational model introduces four new attachment adaptation strategies. One, delusional idealization. Two, externally assembled self. Three, menacing slash paranoid. And four, psychopathy. Let's consider how the delusional idealization, externally assembled self, menacing and or paranoid, and psychopathy attachment adaptations come about in adulthood. A7. In the delusional idealization attachment adaptation, delusional positive affect is present, as negative emotions are completely buried and what the person feels is the opposite. Example of this is the hostage syndrome, or idealizing the person that endangered you and you could not protect yourself from. The delusional person denies the information that the perpetrator is dangerous and idealizes them instead. The person also creates or imagines events that did not happen. A8, in the externally assembled self attachment adaptation, the self is not generated from within, but rather from without. The person is given information about who they are, often by professionals, and then offers that information as who they really are. There are often inconsistencies in these narratives, and they are often told in the third person. So and so says, I am this. C7 and 8. In the menacing and or paranoid attachment adaptation, the person is constantly suspicious of and threatening towards everyone. AC. In the psychopathy attachment adaptation, the person unconsciously makes up a persona that perfectly connects both cognitively and emotionally with whoever they are with. Psychopaths feel like they're everyone's soulmate, except it's totally unreal, something others eventually learn. They are connecting chameleon geniuses. People using these strategies don't willingly come for or do well with psychotherapy. There is no good treatment for them. They are often found in psychiatric hospitals or prisons. Intelligent psychopaths with good impulse control can be very successful. Before concluding our overview of the DMM, let's make a few general remarks about it. Information exchange is increasingly distorted as we proceed down the pie from the top. People who fall into strategies in the upper half of the circle are unlikely to have significant psychological issues. The further down the circle you go, the more likely you are to have a psychological disorder. Between the gray and black lines in the circle on the left of this slide are the people most likely to come for mental health services. Below the black line are people who are a danger to themselves or to others and need a protective environment. In our discussions of attachment, we've touched on Bowlby, Ainsworth, Maine, and Crittenden. Are there other important figures in attachment that we haven't talked about? There are many other attachment theorists. Unfortunately, we don't have the time in this course to consider their work. Some of the more prominent ones include Alan Struve, who worked on attachment in adults, Alan Shore, who has researched the neurobiology of attachment and emotional regulation, and Sue Johnson, who has studied attachment in couples. You said we'd also talk about repetition compulsion today. Is there a connection between repetition compulsion and attachment? Yes, there is indeed a connection between attachment and repetition compulsion. But let's start by defining what repetition compulsion is. Repetition compulsion is a psychological phenomenon in which a person repeatedly unconsciously relives and re-experiences life patterns related to past traumatic events and circumstances. This includes reenacting the event or putting oneself in situations where the event is likely to happen again. Sigmund Freud described two instincts: one, eros, the drive for life, love, creativity, healthy sexuality, self satisfaction, and species preservation. He also described two, thanatos, from the Greek word for death, as the drive towards aggression, sadism, distraction, violence, masochism, and death. Freud thought that repetition compulsion was explained in part by the death instinct. Attachment theorists believe that repetition compulsion occurs when adults engage in the same type of relationship patterns as they did when they were children. These patterns ensured their survival then, but in adulthood, keep them replaying and reliving dysfunctional relationships. To quote philosopher Alain de Botton, "We are not drawn to people who will make us happy. We are drawn to those who resemble people from our childhood and who feel familiar." Attachment has been used to explain repetition compulsion. Why are we drawn to certain people and fall in love with them? It's mostly an unconscious process. According to Sue Johnson, there are at least three different kinds of experience that we call love. One is lust, two, platonic agape or friendship love, and three is attachment-based love. Attachment is seeking connection originally for the sake of survival. In secure attachment, that connection we call love consists of people seeing, hearing, caring for, and respecting each other and accepting who they are. In people with insecure attachment, the inborn attachment system adapts so as to seek connection and security from more or less attuned and predictable parenting figures. These parenting figures may be more or less attuned, predictable, punishing, and dangerous, but children still try to attach to them because evolutionarily, that's all they've got in order to survive. Hence, their attachment system becomes primed or set up to be in these relationships, not healthy, secure ones. It's all they know. They did not experience secure relationships. As adults, because of this attachment priming, they are drawn to the same type of relationship they had in early life and not to people with more secure types of attachment. Those are the relationships they sought safety in. They continue to seek safety in the same type of relationship and keep failing to find safety and connection. That may be why we fall in love with people that in their attachment may resemble our early attachment figures. So, if you're mostly securely attached, you're more likely to fall in love with a person who is also securely attached, as insecurely attached people are less likely to feel like the right fit for you. But if you have significant insecure attachment, you may be more likely to fall in love with people who, after the honeymoon phase, do not know how to listen, care for, and respect you. You may find yourself in relationships that resemble those you experienced as a child. You're better off with a securely attached person whom you may not feel an attachment attraction to, but with securely attached partners, you may have better chances of eventually learning to have a relationship in which you listen to, care for, and respect each other. This may be a case of faking it until you make it. I'm often asked how one might pick a secure partner if they are insecurely attached. What is love? Consider the attachment and lust systems. Agape or platonic love is a compatibility or overlap of values, morals, interests, preference, and play styles, leading to a mutual attraction between people in which lust is not important. Eros, or erotic love, is an attraction based on lust, in which there may or may not be compatibility and secure or insecure attachment. Ideal romantic love is an idealized relationship that combines lust, secure attachment, and compatibility, a trifecta which is extremely rare. A good marriage or partnership is a reasonably secure attachment between the partners in face of inevitable waning of lust, along with reasonable compatibility, but with inevitable areas of incompatibility. Both partners have realistic expectations of the relationship and are more care-based than transactional. A bad marriage or partnership is insecure attachment between the partners, waning lust, and many areas of incompatibility, along with high expectations from the relationship and an inability to repair relationship holes. How do you choose a securely attached partner if you have insecure attachment? This is tongue in cheek. One, have them do an adult attachment inventory. Two, listen to what they say about their childhood and their family. Three, observe how their family interacts and whether they like and get along with each other. And four, take them for an in depth psychological assessment as you would take a used car to a mechanic before buying it. On the PowerPoint presentation that you will find on the website, there's a review and practice component that covers the tools, techniques, and strategies that we have previously covered in the simple course. Looking over those slides will help you consolidate the material. Let's look at the homework for this session. Thank you for spending this time with me today, and see you next session.